Hello, welcome to the Positive Posting Conversation, the show about how to have a better relationship with your dog and cat. I'm Zazie Todd, author of the books Wag and Purr and creator of Companion Animal Psychology blog. My co-host Christy Benson is a dog trainer and anthropologist, and she also works for the Academy for Dog Trainers. We don't give advice on your pet, so if you have concerns, see your veterinarian, dog trainer or cat behaviourist as appropriate. Thanks for joining us today. In episode 2, we chat about building good habits and making New Year's resolutions for our dogs and cats, such as walks for dogs, lap time for cats, and the other habits we have, including our own writing habits. We also chat about helping our pets cope with winter weather, from rain and snow to very, very cold conditions. And in a regular slot at the end, we chat about the books we're reading. Hi everyone, and welcome to the second Positive Post in Conversation. I'm Zazie Todd, and I'm here with special correspondent Christy Benson. Hi Christy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Now, we're recording this in the middle of December, but it's going to go out to people in early January. So that's a time when lots of people are making New Year's resolutions. Are you making any New Year's resolutions at all?
I probably will, but I have not yet. I'm sort of a last minute fly by the seat of my pants resolutions maker. So I haven't come up with anything yet, but I likely will before New Year's Eve strikes. How about you?
No, I very rarely make New Year's resolutions. And the reason for that is that I'm not very good at keeping them. So I gave up a long time ago. I thought if I don't make them, then I don't have to worry about trying to keep them. Do you often make New Year's resolutions every year?
Typically do. I don't always keep them, but I have some where I've had some success. So the ones where I'm sort of like, I've been thinking about making a behavior change for a while, and I feel like it's time. And I just keep putting it off. Those are the ones that are more likely to be successful because I've sort of built it up in my mind as this is something I have to do. So it gives me like a start date.
I think that's a really good idea. If it's something that you're thinking of doing anyway, then you're already set up to do it. Then it's going to give you that push to actually get on and do it. So yeah, that's a nice way of doing it. Another way of thinking about these things, what I do, I try to think about habits. I like thinking about making good habits rather than resolutions. And I don't worry so much if I don't keep a habit going, like now I miss a day, then I can come back to it the next day or something, and it doesn't necessarily, to me it doesn't matter as much. Whereas if I've made a resolution, then I feel bad about myself if I haven't done it. So it's probably just a personal thing. But I have quite a few habits with my dogs and cats, like the kinds of things that we do that we build into their everyday lives, like little bits of enrichment or bits of training and so on. And it's probably the same for you.
Yeah. Yes, I do have habits, I guess. Are you asking what my habits are, or just isn't?
Go on, share some habits.
I think this is probably going to surprise you, but I think the biggest habit and the biggest, most important habit is walking my dogs and everything that goes with it. So chopping up cheese, right now there's like the 75 layers I have to put on to get outside. I think I read a study a while ago that quite a surprising number of people don't walk their dogs very much or at all. And I think it's such a wonderful thing to give our dogs. I think people like us who are in the habit of walking our dogs, we've forgotten what a chore it felt like at the beginning to start doing this, like to start, okay, now it's time to walk my dogs. But once you're doing it, it is a super glorious thing. Your dog gets enrichment and exercise. And so you have like a dog who's feeling happier and more settled. And then once you're doing it, it doesn't feel like a chore. And in fact, it feels great. It feels nice. Like it's a nice thing that I give myself. But that is, I'm going to say, the most important and the biggest habit I have with my dogs. What about you?
Yeah, it used to be walking the dog, and unfortunately, Pepper isn't very keen on walking very far. So I would really prefer it if he would walk further. And what I've had to do is develop a habit of walking without him and then walking him so that I get my walks in the day. But yeah, I think walking the dog is really nice. And I always loved walking Budget and Ghost when we had them. And like you, I mean, just the kind of person who would take the dog out for a walk, whatever the weather, you find a way to get out there at some point in the day. And it's so important because it makes the dog happy, I think. And that's what I enjoy about it. I was quite interested to read a couple of years ago about some research by Carrie Westgarth at the University of Liverpool about people walking their dogs for the dog because it makes the dog happy. And that seems to be quite a big motivator. In her research, that was a thing that motivated lots of people. And for sure, that's what motivates me as well to walk my dog. So now I have Pepper. Pepper's little because he's a Shih Tzu. He has very tiny legs. His tummy is very, very close to the ground. So he gets wet. Like if the ground is wet, then his tummy gets wet. So I understand why he doesn't like that so much. So he goes on short walks and he still has like the same routine each day of what time he's going to go for walks. But the walks are much shorter because that's what he prefers. And he still sniffs a lot on the way. So he does enjoy a walk, but he won't go very far. And he's very good at asking to be picked up and carried if he thinks we've gone too far. He just kind of slows to a stop and looks up at me. And I know what he's doing is saying, please carry me home.
You must be getting strong arms from carrying him around.
Well, yeah, luckily he doesn't weigh as much as at the beginning. But yeah, if you carry him too far, you do notice. So when we adopted him, he was very overweight and he was around 10 kilos and now he's down to just under 8 kilos. So that's like, it's not like carrying a big dog or anything, but yeah, you do notice his weight in your arms. What about with your cat? Because you have a cat too. Do you have any habits that relate to your cat?
I guess like other than just the sort of provisioning of food and enrichment, and I guess one of the biggest things that we do together, maybe it's not a habit, it's just a thing we do, is he needs a ton of lap time, like a ridiculous amount of lap time. And so I work, 5 days a week in my office, and he pretty much needs 8 hours on my lap. So he's almost always on my lap when I'm here. So as soon as I get down, I just hear his little feet coming because he's like, he's behind me right now on the couch, but it's actually unusual that he's not in my lap. He was in my lap for the whole last recording that we did, because he really does need a ton of lap time. And when we've gone away and we've had people stay with him, we get calls like, holy cow, your cat needs so much lap time. He's just constantly, and he gets a little owly if he doesn't get it. He's not gonna be quiet and suffer in silence.
I think that's lovely. I would like that. So when we adopted Harley, he's not a lap cat at all, unfortunately. But Melina is a bit of a lap cat, but not to that extent. She does come and sit on my lap every evening. And that's quite nice because I always have Pepper on the settee with me as well. Sometimes he'll put his head on my lap. He doesn't really like to sit on my lap. And mostly he prefers not to sit next to me. He'll go down the other end of the settee, but he wants to be on the settee with me. And then Melina comes and sits on my lap, or sometimes she goes in between us and she gets very, very close to Pepper, even though she doesn't actually cuddle up with him. So that's quite sweet. That's kind of a habit with her. There has to be this point in the day when I go and sit down and she gets to come and sit on my lap. Nice. Whereas Harley actually loves to be brushed. And for years, I didn't know this. And when I first started brushing him, he actually began to kind of attack me because it was all a bit much for him, but he's got used to it and he loves it so much. And if I don't brush him, he gets quite upset and he will come and find me and he will start meowing and, demanding lots of attention. And he's just asking to be brushed. And if I say brush, he comes running, whereas he does not come running if I say his name. So maybe he thinks he's called Brush now. I don't know. We changed his name.
He's got multiple names.
Yes. So anyway, that's quite nice, but that's really important to Harley every day. And one of the things is if something is a habit and you do it at the same time every day, it really becomes a habit because your pet is there waiting for you, looking at you like, okay, it's time now. So Harley will come and meow if it's time for him to be brushed, in the same way that Pepper will come and look at me if it's time for him to go out, or Bodger used to come and get me if it was time for him to go out. And do you take your dogs for walks at the same time every day? So do you get the same request from them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we go walking after my work day. And right now, because we're kind of far north and in the mountains, for light reasons, it has to be about 3:30 that I leave, or else it'll be dark when I'm walking. So at around 3:15, Timber breaks through we have a dog gate at the top of the stairs. And if it's not latched, he can open it. He usually doesn't, but around, 10 or 15 minutes before walk time, he'll open it. He'll break through, and all of the dogs will come downstairs, and he'll just be running around kind of, he gets this like stompy, whiny, it's walk time kind of thing that he does. And then I'm like, okay, it's not 3:30 yet though. Come on, man. But no, he's a good walkie alarm clock for sure.
Excellent. I think it's really nice when pets know their own habits, and those things are, you can tell that those things are important to them. So what kinds of habits do you think are really good habits for cat or dog guardians to have? Obviously, the habit of going for a walk most days is a good one if your dog is able to walk. What other habits do you think dog and cat guardians should have?
I think nail trims is a big one. And I see nail trims as just like an ongoing training thing, just like walks, I guess, so you have your cubes of cheese set up. We try and do nails every week or two. I don't reach that standard, but that's like a standard that I would have set for myself. Because it's hard when the nails get long and you're paring back. If you're being aggressive, you can nick the quick, and then it slows you down again. So I would say it's a good habit to just make that a special fun time and do it. We do it Saturdays, so do it on Saturdays, and then it's done, and you feel good for the rest of the weekend. So I think that's a good habit to get into.
So with Pepper being a Shih Tzu, I have to groom him, and I groom him every day. And we actually keep him quite short. So like a long haired Shih Tzu, I think you would probably have to groom like twice a day or something. But I have to groom him every day, even though we keep him short. Otherwise, he just starts to get mats, because his fur, it's like my own hair, basically. It is very much like hair. And if I didn't brush my own hair every day, it would all get knots and so on. So I have to brush him every day, but fortunately he's used to it. And then he does go to the groomer, which is quite helpful, because they cut his hair and they do a good job and give him a bath and stuff. So it saves me that part, but I do have to brush him every day. So that's 2 of the 3 creatures in this house who have to be brushed every day. The other cat, sometimes she comes and hangs around and I go like, brush, and then that's it. That's enough. She likes that, but she doesn't really want to be brushed, and she's short haired, so she doesn't have to be. It's not like, Harley's not that long haired. He's the short haired cat, but his fur is longer than hers. A long haired cat, of course, will be quite different. I think another good habit is thinking about where you're going to keep the treats. And I think this probably for both of us is second nature. Like we've got this figured out, and we know where we like to keep the treats, and they're to hand when we need to rush and get them. But I think for a lot of people who are new to having a dog or sometimes a cat, it really helps to think about where they want to keep the treats. Like especially if it's a puppy and they're house training, they want to have them by the door so they can rush out with the treats when they're, to reward the puppy for being outside, that kind of thing. So I think that's a good one too. And probably everyone has different solutions to that, like whether they want to keep them in a cookie jar or in the fridge or just in a cupboard in the packet or whatever, or always having some in your coat or something like that. But I think that's another good habit too.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And just making sure that you have them, like that you plan ahead, so that you can have them on hand. You don't run out all the time. That was another habit that took.
Yeah. And I think that kind of habit can take a little while to build up, but once you're used to it, it's just second nature. You don't even think about it. You just end up finding that you've gone to the coffee shop and you've got, you reach into your pocket for your purse and you bring out all of these treats as well, because you're just so used to having treats everywhere, wherever you go. I guess with cats, scooping the litter tray is an important one. Habits aren't just fun habits, are they? They can also be the necessary things that you just have to do, scooping the litter tray once or twice a day is an important one to keep your cat happy, definitely. Yes. And then habits around medication too, because we have Harley, he's a diabetic cat, so he has to have insulin injections twice a day. And at the moment, Pepper's on pain meds, so he has those once a day. So you have to remember those too.
Yeah.
They become a habit. They have to. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. We have one of those little daily, it's like a 7-day pill thing with little lids. Just, I think one of the things, I know we talk about this a lot, but is making it easier on yourself as the human to get into good habits. So anything you can do to reduce kind of that feeling of this is such a chore every day, it really makes a lot of sense. I think it makes habits easier to serve. allow them to gel.
Mm. Yeah, I think so, definitely. And just sometimes having habits just makes life much easier just because you've got into the habit. Like some of the things that you do, like just a habit of having your dog wait at the door instead of running out. If you live somewhere where it's not safe for your dog to just run out, then that's helpful too. You never know when it's going to be useful. Yeah, sure. And is it rather cold where you are at the moment?
Yeah, it feels cold. It's -13 apparently right now. But it feels pretty cold. It's not like a warm, it's not like a springtime sunny -13. So it's definitely quite chilled. How about you?
That sounds quite chilly, and it's not so bad here. It's a dry day at the moment. We've had a few snowflakes, but not much, and it's -1 Celsius. So for the Americans who are listening, that's probably 32 Fahrenheit, just under 31 perhaps. Yeah, so it's not too cold, I don't mind. And it's not raining. So I'm quite glad that it's not raining. So that's good. But do you change the activities that you do with your dogs in the wintertime?
Well, we have quite, when the dogs were younger, not really, because our dogs are sled dogs, as you know, but our listeners might not. I have sled dogs. So they're racing sled dog type. They tend to get, even though they're short hair, they tend to get, a lot of them, a really good undercoat. So they're fine in winter down to quite cold temperatures. But now that quite a few of our dogs are older, what I have started to do this winter is I walk in loops. So I circle, I go out on a loop and I come back. And then if the dogs are feeling sore or tired or cold, they can just exit whenever they want. So I find, one old dog might come for one loop and then go in. And sometimes I'll head out, and a couple of the dogs, they like being in the yard too. So they don't have constant access to our whole yard just because it's not safe, but I'll let them into the yard when I'm walking so they can go around, and they like going in with the cattle and stuff. They can join in for a loop if they want. If they don't want to, they're just in the yard for an hour or something, and then we all go in together. So I think giving them the ability to come if that's attractive to them, with how they're feeling today. If they're feeling warm enough, if they're feeling limber enough, then they're welcome to, but there's not. I mean, obviously, I'm pulling them because I have a big bag of cheese on my person. So there's that. But yeah, so that's a new thing this year.
Mm. Oh, yeah. I think it's nice that they get the choice of whether or not to go outside. I mean, one thing I've noticed about Pepper is that he hates it when it's raining. He really doesn't like to walk in the rain, even though he has a raincoat. He prefers it if we hold an umbrella over him. But I don't always do that. Sometimes just make him come out in his raincoat. But the hood always falls off his head. Like he has a hood, but he shakes his head and makes it fall off. So his head always gets wet anyway. And like I said, his tummy is quite prone to getting wet. So he doesn't like that. It turns out he doesn't mind the snow at all. So even like if there's a choice between walking on wet ground and walking on snow, he actually picks the snow. So that was a surprise. But
I'm not surprised. I'd pick snow over rain and mud any day of the week.
Yeah, I think I probably would too, to be honest. Yeah. But so we haven't yet had any deep snow. We've only had little bits of snow. So I don't know what he's going to think when there's like a foot of snow and he's only little, and we'll have to shovel a path for him so that he can still walk. So, do you have any tips on protecting dogs from the cold in the winter? Because you're used to much more severe winters than I am.
So I think sort of my go-to is the best for my dogs has always been if we can keep the dogs when we go out on walks, not a sedate walk, which would allow them to get cold, but something that's a bit more active. So sled dogs, and I assume this applies to other dogs, produce a ton of heat in their bodies when they're being active. And in fact, that's the reason why racing sled dogs have a shorter coat, is because they need to disperse the heat that they make. They can overheat. So even in really cold temperatures. So if we can, it's sort of a loose hike. So driving somewhere where you can have a loose hike and the dog is really active makes more sense, for my dogs than trying to walk them somewhere, even a short walk on leash where we're only going human speed, which is pretty slow. So I try to run with my dogs and keep them really active and allow them to go loose. And I know that it's a privilege for me living here to be able to allow my dogs to go loose so they can really run around. And I can keep a good eye on them and sort of make judgment calls about, if they're lifting their feet and shivering a lot, they're not comfortable and I need to change up what I'm doing. So we don't use coats on our dogs unless it's extremely cold, like lower than about -30 with wind. -30 is comfortable for my dogs. -30 with a big, -45 wind chill. We're going to take a short walk, or else the dogs are unpleasant to live with. But we're gonna put coats on the dogs who have, and always give them, never go too far. So I would circle the house kind of thing, so that they can always, if they're like, this is too much for me, they can always head home, and our door is open, so they can always go right inside the house if they want to.
So if it does get too cold for them, they can go in. And I bet they are better with cold temperatures than you are. I mean, you must have to wear a coat, a nice warm sweater underneath.
I do.
Yeah.
I have a ton. Well, we lived in the Western Arctic for a number of years. So we got like a quality lesson on good winter wear. So we do have good winter wear. And we also, it's important, because I'm going to spend time outside with my dogs every day. It's important that I have quality gear. And I think that's something that is almost like a gift to my dogs. So when we moved here, I got like waterproof running shoes, and they're amazing. Like, it's so good to have. I can now, because it's so much rainier here, I can go out and I can step in puddles. It's pretty fun. But we also have really good winter boots. I have snowsuits. I have really good winter coats. So, and that's because, I have to be just as comfortable as my dogs. So yeah, definitely lots of winter stuff. Yeah. But if you get good quality, it lasts forever. So
that's true, actually, because I have a jacket which I got years and years ago when I used to go skiing, and I'm a terrible skier, but when we still lived in England, we used to go skiing in France or in Switzerland sometimes. And so I still have the coat, the ski jacket that I used to wear then, and now I just wear it on cold, snowy days. So yeah. It has been lasting like forever, which is really good. Yeah. So Pepper does have to have winter coats. It turns out that getting coats, I wasn't prepared for a little dog in this way, but it turns out it's actually quite fun buying coats and sweaters for a little dog, and then you get to dress them up. So that's very nice. He has like a summer weight raincoat and a winter weight raincoat that's kind of more padded. And then he has a couple of sweaters, has a nice Fair Isle sweater and a nice reflective sweater as well. Not that he goes very far at night time, but like if we were up on the road at night, then because there's no street lights here, then, he would light up bright in a car's headlights or something. So that turns out to be fun. But Huskies have great coats, I think, for winter weather. They're really designed for the cold, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are. Absolutely. Even if it was, I think it was about -10 yesterday, or maybe even colder, -10 or -15, and snowing. And there's snow on the back of the dog's coats when they come in. So their coats are so protective that their body heat isn't even melting the snow on their backs.
Yeah. We used to get that with Ghost, who's a sled dog that we used to have, who I, wrote about in my book, and he would have the snow on him and it would just brush off. And he would walk through the mud and somehow the mud would just fall off him. Whereas Bodger, like, he would walk through mud and he would just be caked in mud, and he would need a lot of brushing and cleaning to get him clean. It was just amazing the way that it would just totally fall off. Ghost husky type fur was just incredible.
Yeah. Huskies are awesome. Self-cleaning.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, as Pepper just needs so much, and I think Pepper's just needs grooming every day, whether it's winter or summer. It doesn't really make much difference. Whereas when it's wet, though, I think it is worse. And Bodger used to get sticks caught in his fur when it was wet, and they would be a nightmare to get out. Like, it was all right when he dried off, then they would just kind of fall out, but otherwise he would come in and he would just have all these little bits of sticks stuck in him.
That's like Soleil, our spaniel-y thing. She gets rose, not as much here, but in Manitoba, there's a lot of wild rose. It's a common weed. And so the rose with all the little spines on it would get stuck in her pants.
Yeah. That was always where things with thorns would get stuck into Bodger as well, stuck on the pants. Yeah. And so when it comes to
Pepper's coat, was Pepper comfortable with it right away, or did you have to do some training?
He wasn't completely comfortable with it right away, but he wasn't terrible. I mean, he's the kind of dog that will just let people do things to him, except he will actually bite if he gets fed up. Not that he doesn't have all of his teeth, but I'm pretty sure he would bite if he was unhappy. He would go to bite more quickly than, say, Bodger would have done or Ghost would have done. And he didn't mind a bit, but I did have to use a few treats to get him used to it. Now he's completely used to it. He doesn't mind. He just comes every day. He lies there. He knows he's going to get a treat at the end. The bit that was hardest was that he has to have his eyes wiped. Because he gets underneath his eyes, he gets lots of gunk stuck, and he just has to be wiped all around his eyes because of the way that Shih Tzus are designed. Unfortunately, their eyes are a bit sticky outy, and so he needs a bit of help with that, and he didn't like that at all. So it took quite a lot of treats to get him used to having that done, and he tolerates it. But to be honest, he still doesn't really like it. He's only doing it because he knows he's going to get a treat for having had it done. He wouldn't voluntarily have his eyes wiped otherwise, but he knows when it's going to happen. I say, Isis. I don't know why. It's just what I started saying to him every time. So he knows what's about to happen. And he actually tends to roll over on his side and wait. And then he lets me wipe a few times, and then I give him a treat, and it's all right. But he did have to be trained with it. And also with his tail. He wasn't so keen on his tail being brushed, and he doesn't like his tail being held. But luckily I can brush it without holding it, and he prefers it like that. But like if I was to go and hold his tail and brush it, he doesn't like that very much. Yay, we're being joined by some doggy friends.
Here. And here's Timber. He's a little bit early for his pre-walk.
And there's Africa in the background too. That's very nice. That's good. So I've got a different kind of habit I want to ask you about, which is to do with writing, because you write some really great pieces, because you write for the Positive Post and you write for Companion Animal Psychology because you're a special correspondent. So you do writing for us, but you also write for the Academy for Dog Trainers, and you write your own blog, and sometimes you write for like Sled Dog Magazine. I forget the name of it, but other places as well. So what kinds of writing habits do you have?
Terrible writing habits. I don't have any good solid habits. I think I usually write most of the time, if you're going to find me writing, it would be in the evening. So I'll have an inspiration, and then I'll be after supper or something. And I have a little Chromebook. And so if I'm sitting there reading on it or something, I'll go, oh my God, this is such a great idea. I want to write a blog. So then I will start writing in the evening, just as I sit in a big comfy chair. But I don't have good, I get up every morning and write 500 word habits or something. Maybe that would make me more prolific, but so I'm mostly, when inspiration strikes, I sit down and write. Typically in evenings, but sometimes I'll be working on something for my day job, and I'll say, oh my God, I want to write about that, and then I'll write about it.
Well, it works because you write some good pieces. So it definitely works. I write every day, but I have done for a long time now. It didn't used to be a habit. I used to write when I had inspiration or felt like it, or when I had a deadline. That would kind of force things along. But now I try and write something every day, and I've done that for a long time. And I think that kind of helps. But I write best in the morning, and I don't write very well at all in the evening. I think I'm tired by then and want to do other things, or sit with the cat on my lap or something and not actually write. So yeah, for me the habit is checking all my social media and stuff, going for my walk, and then coming back and sitting down and writing something. And also I also try to end on a point where it's easy to pick up the next time, because that just makes it so much easier. If I sit down, I know exactly where I'm going to be starting from. Like when I'm working on a book, I try and leave it where I know what the next bit will be. I don't like to leave it at a point where I'm stuck, because then it's just too difficult. And I sit down and I'm like, I don't know what to do. So, I try and keep it going that way. And that's another habit I think that helps me with that. Okay,
maybe that'll be my New Year's resolution. I'll try and write for half an hour every morning or something.
Yeah, the thing is, like, you don't have to write many words. Even if you only write 200 words a day, it adds up. And similarly, when I look back at all the things I've written for my blog, like that's every week, that's 800 words to 1,000 words every week over what's almost 10 years now. That's a lot of words. It does actually add up to a lot of words.
For sure.
I was looking yesterday at the file for just this year's blog posts, and it said it had 41,000 words in it, and they're not they didn't all make it into blog posts. It includes like notes, like references and things like that. But it's a lot of words that I've written in the year. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that's a ton. Like half a novel.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. Yeah, half a novel or half a nonfiction book. And that's a good point to segue to talk about books. So first of all, I'm going to go with the book club book, and then we can each say something about a book that we are reading at the moment, because this is going to be a regular slot at the end of these chats. So the book club this month. So this is the December book, and obviously people will listen to this in January, but the book for December is A Dog's World by Jessica Pierce and Marc Bekoff, imagining the lives of dogs in a world without humans. And in a way, it's kind of depressing, because here we are in the midst of a pandemic, and I think we can all imagine that things might go terrible, pear-shaped. They took the idea from another book that was about imagining what would happen if humans just disappeared. And they thought, well, what would happen to dogs if there weren't any people anymore? And they've been quite thorough in how they've looked at it, and they've looked at different aspects of dogs' lives, like how would they mate with each other? What kind of shape dogs would we end up with? Because, of course, people breed dogs for all kinds of shapes, and they're not necessarily good for the dogs. Whereas if dogs are allowed to freely breed, they would end up looking really quite different. And they look at how would dogs eat? What kinds of things would dogs eat if we weren't here to feed them? And they start right at the beginning of the book by talking about being at the dog park, seeing dogs do things, and the way that so many of us will see our dog do something silly and we'll think, well, how would you cope without a person, without me to help look after you? And then they've gone all through what would happen to dogs. So it's a really interesting thought experiment.
Perfect.
Cool. So what are you reading at the moment, Christy?
Okay, so I am reading this book.
The Sleep Solution.
Yeah. Why Your Sleep is Broken and How to Fix It. And it's not actually, I didn't buy it. I don't actually have lots of problems sleeping. But it's just so good. It's so interesting. It's about, the purpose of sleep and why we sleep and how people talk about sleep. But the author is hilarious, like really funny, like just makes like constant hilarious footnotes. So it's just like a pleasure to read. It's interesting to hear about sleep. It's interesting to hear about how wrong we all are about sleep, like the things that we think about our own bodies. And then it's fun to hear, because he sticks in little sort of snippets about his practice. So he'll be like, typically this is when I look at the wife and she, rolls her eyes or something. So it's interesting. And it's also just so well written from a writing perspective. If you like funny nonfiction, like information books, it's good. And apparently it's super handy and useful if you do have problems sleeping, which I think is something that we all struggle with, especially as we age into cronehood.
That sounds really good. I might have to get hold of that. I always like books that are a bit funny as well. There aren't enough books that are funny, I think. So yeah, but fascinating topic. Good. So mine is a book of short stories. It's this one.
How to Pronounce Knife.
Yes, How to Pronounce Knife by Souvankham Thammavongsa, who is a Canadian writer. And it's a set of short stories, and they're really good. She has quite a spare, elegant kind of writing style. And the very first one in the book is about how to pronounce knife. And as you can tell from the way that you pronounced it, knife, it's one of those English words that people learning English as a second language really struggle with, because we don't pronounce the K, and kids really struggle with as well. So that's kind of what happens in the first short story. So that's good. But also the stories are really quite varied and quite different, and applying to different kinds of situations and different kinds of people. So there's a lot of things to enjoy, and they're all quite short. So if you don't have much time, but you just want to be in another world for a little while, it's really good. So I'm really enjoying it. It's a really nice book. So yeah. And I think it's done quite well in Canada, or certainly I've heard lots of people talking about it. And there's been quite a lot of buzz about this book, and I feel like I'm a bit late coming to it, but I can see why there's been all that buzz, because it is a very good read.
Cool.
Yeah, good. Okay, so I guess we're coming to the end of this recording, and I want to say thank you to everybody who's listening or watching. If you have any questions that you would like me or Christy to answer in one of these recordings, you can send them in to me anytime and we will answer them next time to the best of our ability. And they could be questions about pets, they could be questions about writing, or anything that you want to know about us. It's like an Ask Me Anything, and we'll answer them. So feel free to email me your questions.
Exactly.
This episode was recorded in December 2022. Thank you for listening to the Positive Posting Conversation. If you liked this episode, please subscribe to the show and write us a review via your podcast app. For the show notes, visit companionanimalpsychology.com. This show was produced by Zazie Todd. The music is Melody from Paris by Studio Le Bousse. See you next time.